What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Today we've got a very special guest. It's Laura Forcum? I should have asked this before you got on.
Lura Forcum.
I knew we
Thank you
missed
for
Forcum.
something. I
checking.
knew we missed something.
Damn.
with Independent Center. And since I just got back from a crazy trip and haven't had enough time to do my brush up, I'm going to let Laura go ahead and tell you about this before I completely butcher what her and her organization does. So tell us what you do.
My name's Laura Forcum. I'm the president of the Independent Center, and the Independent Center works with voters who feel like they're politically homeless. So whether you are like independent minded or you're actually registered independent, you're welcome to join us. We are people who have questions about public policy um, and who aren't really happy with how either of the parties are behaving right now. And so we're trying to get people who otherwise kind of want to sit out of politics because let's be honest, it's not fun in there. Trying to get those folks to step back in, be educated about what policy looks like, how they can vote, how they can engage, and that's really it. We do a lot of research on independent voters and just try to understand what's important to them and help them voice their preferences.
Awesome. So, how did you get into doing that? How was this formed? When did it start? What have you been doing actionably in that time?
Okay, so we're a really new organization. We are about a year and a half old. We have an audience of about 130,000 people, and we currently what we do primarily is send out a weekly or bi-weekly newsletter. We have a social media following, and we do quite a bit of research, which and like writing that we release. So we will do something like a focus group we're about to release right now, where we just sat around with voters. This was in the Detroit area. So we had a group of voters who were right of center voters, and then later we had a group who were left of center. We just kind of asked them like, what's going on in politics? What are you seeing? How do you feel about what you're seeing? What are your expectations? What's going well? What's not? So we do that type of research like quite a bit and try to understand from all this demographic data that people are publishing, like what actually makes sense about this group of voters, because we know millennials especially are like among the most likely to identify as independent. And so you asked how I got into this work. Like I have kind of an odd background for this. I have a PhD in consumer psychology, and I was a marketing professor for 7 years. And my research is about like how people relate to one another, how they get along with each other, how they understand ideas or how they don't want to understand ideas. And so my interest really is in like, how do we get people to participate in politics? And my preference is like, I'd like to participate as an independent because I don't like either one of these parties. I don't feel like they stand for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So I guess as with the background, it's like a kind of a psychological background, I know there's been a lot of studies on sort of the like even just like the brain pathways or whatever between like Republican or Democratic or left or right leaning kind of voters. Does that come into play, or is that just like a kind of pop science kind of thing that you don't really look at?
No, we aren't using it at the Independent Center. I've seen some of that research kind of trying to explain why conservative people are conservative. And honestly, I raise my eyebrows at a lot of it because it seems to have this assumption a lot of the time that like these right of center voters are wrong and like what's wrong with them. And I don't think that that's really unbiased or scientific or helpful. So
Sure.
yeah, so I'm more interested in, and I actually have some research on like what if you just measure people's values, like what kind of groups would they break into? And I think that's a lot more interesting rather than trying to figure out what the two parties are doing, because at this point, like their values are all over the place. It's not like you see these consistent values that have been the same over long periods of time, especially in recent years, right? Like you're probably familiar with this, like some kind of realignment is happening.
Mhm.
And I, I feel like we're so close to it. It's like trying to understand something that's that close to your face. Like we don't have any perspective where we are right now.
Yeah. So, what is your
Sure.
research? What have you had any epiphanies with the research you've been doing so far?
Well, I'll tell you. So, like, the Independent Center's research is often like survey research that says, who are you going to, right? We were doing a lot pre-election, right? Like, who are you going to vote for? And that kind of horse race stuff is interesting and important, but like, that's not what we're focused on right now. Some of the research I did right before I came to the Independent Center, I think was interesting because basically what we did was like measure people's values and ask them things like, do you feel like you have resources? Do you feel like you have social support? What do you think makes somebody moral or not moral? So kind of like the building blocks of how you live your life. And we asked them questions like that and then used this statistical technique to group people. And to me, the thing that was most interesting is like, if you assume that we have Democrats and Republicans because like they have values that are totally opposed to one another, like we didn't find support for that in our research. Like the groups that emerged, there were 7 of them, and they tended to be split across political parties. So to me, that was like, you could say it's hopeful, you could say it's concerning. Like it's hopeful in the sense that like we actually have a lot more in common than you would think and that
Hmm.
we talk about. Maybe it's concerning because it's like, okay, why are we talking about each other like this if we have so much in common? Like,
Yeah.
why is it this divided and polarized and just unpleasant?
Right. I guess that's, I think that's probably where people, they hear, and I think most people would probably, if they're not like too, I hate to say radicalized by either party, but just sort of like have that mindset. Like I would think that most people would agree. Like generally, people prefer to be moral and good people, and I think the difference and what people who are more politically engaged would argue is that each left and right sides argue for different aspects of that morality, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're seeing this divide. It doesn't seem like it's down to like a fundamental level, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's the kind of thing that like prevents us from getting along with one another. Um, it's the building blocks are there. It's like you said, it's kind of like, what does that mean to you in practice?
Yeah, yeah. I guess Jordan, go ahead if you had something.
Well, yeah. I read something interesting at some point. This is off the top of my head, and I'm super paraphrasing and can't cite it because again, off the top of my head. But it was an explanation of like you'd say we all find certain things like moral, but we put our moral priorities in a different hierarchy, and then
Hmm.
that applies our behavior and our beliefs around that morality in different ways. So like where people on the left, according to the survey, from what I'm remembering, said or whatever it was, like prioritized justice and equality as like one of their highest moral convictions, where people on the right um, uh, valued loyalty and authority or rule of law, that sort of thing. And so like that loyalty thing would send them to be loyal to party even when things may not be
Hmm.
going the way that they want, where like the justice and equality thing would be like we'll throw our party under the bus if they're not doing what we think they should be doing on this type of topic or issue. And so I think that, yeah, well, we all agree that being loyal is a moral thing to do, and being, just and equitable is a moral thing to do. But then again, equity can get in the way of loyalty, where if you're not
Hmm.
being loyal to your own country first, or you perceive that you're not being loyal to your own country because you're allowing in immigrants or something along those lines, you feel like the position you're taking to keep them out is a moral position, where the people who are like, we need to be equitable and allow these people to come in and seek a better life because that's the moral thing to do over
Hmm.
loyalty to country. So you see the other people as amoral and vice versa, where you still both value the the principles, you just value them in a different order, and when you can't agree on that order is where things get messy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the I think the social media conversations we're having are not like unpacking or dealing with this messiness, right? Like they're just people being outraged at each other. Um,
Hmm.
and I think one of the things that was really striking about the focus group we had was like both groups, people kind of noted at the end, they were like, "Hey, if this conversation had happened on an internet chat room, like it would have looked nothing like this." And I think a big part of it is that we evolved to get along with each other in person and not through screens.
Hmm.
And a lot of the stuff that makes it easier for us to find common ground with people, even over like really difficult issues, really complex issues, really like emotionally loaded stuff, like
Hmm.
it's just gone if it's, arguing in the comments and like, somebody's hot takes, like all the subtlety is gone, all the nuance is gone, and we're just kind of left. It's really easy to forget that, like, hey, yes, they're also having like a moral argument and a moral conversation here.
Hmm.
It doesn't sound like what I'm saying, but it's still grounded in like concern for other people.
Yeah. Um, I'd agree, and I think that if we've ever seen that video of the dogs that are separated by a automatic gate, and they're just barking at each other and snarling like they're gonna kill each other, and then the owner just opens the gate and they stay with the gate until the gate's all the way open, and then they just stop barking and turn around and walk away. Like once that
Oh, I've
divider
never
is
seen
gone, and it's
that.
oh it's hilarious. But it's it's we all experience this. You call everybody an asshole when you're in the car, but you bump into somebody in the grocery store and it's, oh, my bad, I'm sorry. Like, and yeah, I think, obviously, when there's a screen between you, it's the same as when you're sitting in your own little world in the car, and you don't have that ability. And again, I just got back from Texas with the Unfuck America tour thing, where we were a group of liberal to incredibly progressive content creators, showed up at Texas A&M, which is the 13th most conservative college in the country, at a Charlie Kirk rally, which is a fucking Klan rally. I mean, it was some cringy vibes. But all of these people who, I mean, these are the same people who give me death threats in my comments and try to like dox me and stuff like that. We had none of those types of interactions when you're there in person, and we had
Oh, that's
conversations when you're
interesting.
there in person, and you get to talk to these people and allow them to express themselves, and then contradict that with something. And a lot of times these are people that they've never heard about or met or seen in real life, because we had an incredibly diverse group of people and a relatively homogenistic place, and obviously media demonizes and propagandizes marginalized groups, brown people, LGBTQ people, veterans to some extent, people with mental illness or physical disabilities. And so to like put a real person to that face and be like, do you hate me? Do you think that I shouldn't exist because of this? Because this is what you say. Um, it's a lot harder to say that
Yeah.
to somebody's face and realize that no, this is actually a human being and not just somebody told me about. And so I do think that in face um interaction is incredibly important in finding that common ground.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fascinating like setup that you guys had. I would love to hear more about that. That's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah, we can talk about it a little more. Obviously, this is here to talk about you today, but I would love to tell you more about it
Hmm.
at another time. So,
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah.
isn't it? I think so. Getting back to communication and like social media for a second. I mean, isn't it kind of just like kind of goes really historical back to like pre-social media in how news has been used to propagandize or politicize whatever in order to influence a population to prefer some particular policy or something that's happening in the world. Like, what is it? Wasn't the Bay of Pigs, but it was, I think it was before that. What was the thing that happened in Cuba before the Bay of Pigs? It was like 1930 something about Sunk the Maria.
Was it the Maine? The Maine that was sunk? I am not here to talk about historical knowledge. Can I have a cheat sheet? I'm afraid I'm gonna get in trouble for my lack of historical knowledge. Yeah, remember the Maine thing. Yeah, like yellow journalism and
right. And I feel like social media is just basically where before you had to own some sort of publication or run some sort of news corporation to influence, and now all you have to do is be somebody on social media who has some extra time on their hands, and now you could find more and more people to just proliferate your idea. If it's so much easier to make an idea catch on. And I think that really hurts when it used to be people kind of got their news from a somewhat unbiased source in whatever local news source they had, and now we have this sort of centralized news system, and they use social media to make everybody more polarized. And so
yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple of things about social media and like the spread of information, and like one of the things is that in the research they call this the arousal level. So the arousal level of an emotion is what determines whether it goes viral or not. And like a reasonable conversation where you're talking about nuance has like no arousal at all. Like people are like, yes, we're going through the facts, we're being very rational, right? When you're furious, that is when you like take that news story and share it with other people. So like we know that where there's a ton of anger and outrage, like that is the stuff that spreads. So I think it's really important to be aware of it. I don't know what we do about it. And the other thing I would say is some of these emotions are incredibly reinforcing and addicting because they're shared. So being outraged together is like fun. It's great. Like if you haven't tried it, then I don't know where you've been in the year 2025. But like, I mean, you know how good that feels. That's nothing is better than getting together and being outraged with people who agree with you. And I mean, I guess our like great grandparents knew this, right? Like they probably sat on porches and like shook their finger at people. So they got to have a tiny dose of it, but the scale that you can do it on the internet and like the ability for it to spread through social media is just supercharged.
Right. It used to be limited to barbershops, bridge clubs, and like salons and front porches. And now you literally have it in your pocket 24/7, sending you notifications to look at me.
Yeah.
And people all around the world too. Like, everybody who's got internet connection, you can connect with and be outraged with or at them.
Yeah. And there's not time. Like it's hard to find an emotion that's more constructive, that spreads as much, right? So like if you want to be like, let's have a shared social emotion that's really positive and constructive, like we can sit around and like approve of people. Like that just doesn't you do see some. It does happen.
Trends go where for sure. Like trends go where it's like we're gonna uplift certain people right now and that goes around for a while, but it always peters out. I mean it never sticks around forever, it feels like.
Well, that's why we got to have a month for every cause, right? Like we have to remind ourselves like, hey, this is the month where we pay extra attention on these people, because it's good to pay attention to people that are not doing so well in our society. And we wouldn't need to have those kind of months if we were just always like caring about those issues and those people.
Yeah. And you don't need a month for being outraged, like, right? Like you don't need a month of like, this is the month we're going to be outraged at whatever.
Maybe that's what we need to do. We need to make it so you can only be outraged at one point during the year. So you just need to get all your outrage out at this point. um, bring it in. Then we'd
Was
have been
that
forced to go through
Forced
other
outrage.
emotions. Yeah.
in Seinfeld? It's Festivus for the rest of us.
Yeah.
We should just do that instead of Christmas,
Yes. Like air
like the
your
week before Christmas.
grievances. I
uh,
mean, maybe we're missing an opportunity here.
Yeah, just think how our
basically,
society could transform.
I sort of feel like this is ultimately what the basis of the purge is built on, though. So
Yeah,
slippery slope type
actually,
stuff.
you could definitely turn that into a just flip it the other way, and gets out of hand quick. Actually, yeah,
Um, the other thing I think that is really powerful, and one of the reasons why, aside from the fact that our system was, basically constructed to devolve into a two-party system, even though the founding fathers pretended like that's not what they wanted. They gave us a system where that was inevitable. And obviously, there's a lot of money invested in keeping a two-party system,
Yeah.
that wants to fight it. The other thing with it, and with, political tribalism is that, people like to belong to something.
Yes.
They want to be a part of a club, and I think that this is why things like flat earthers still exist.
Hmm.
This is why mega is a thing. Like it seems insane, but you think that, like, especially if you don't have a fulfilling social life, um, the fact that you can just adopt an ideology, and as long as you are loyal to that ideology and defend that ideology, you're accepted. You are part of the club, and you're not gonna be rejected from those people. And so, like, I think a lot of it is, it doesn't really matter if they agree on the issues. They have
Yeah.
to disagree on those issues in order to remain in their club,
Hmm.
and they will fight that regardless of what information you put in front of them, regardless of if you say
Hmm.
you and this person who you claim to hate want the exact same thing on the array of issues that you find most important to you.
Yeah.
And so, like, what's your thoughts on that, and what have you seen in your work with
This is
that,
a
and how
cat, by the way.
and
Hello.
how do you how do we go about overcoming that?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of social psychology is focused on these group dynamics. And I think it's a really helpful way to understand what's happening in our politics right now, the difference between how we treat members of our in group and how we treat out group members. But I mean, you're absolutely right that like that need to belong is really powerful. Um, and it's really motivating because if you don't belong to a group, right, like over evolutionary time,
Hmm.
you were going to die. And I think what's really interesting, and maybe people aren't quite aware of this now, is like you're still going to die if you're not part of a group, because we
Yeah.
know that research on people who are socially isolated shows that they have like way higher rates of disease and early mortality. So, like, there, and I think like we don't even fully understand why that's so important to human survival.
Hmm.
But like, it's interesting because I think we are applying the wrong lens to political parties when we're like, oh, this is a group of rational people who are going to tell us what is good public policy and make good laws that make our country a better place to live. Like, I don't think that's what they do. Um, I think that you're right. They're incredibly powerful, and they care about raising money and consolidating power and keeping it. And they don't want to see competition. They do not want to see a third party independent group of independent voters become powerful, because if that happens, then right, like that's going to mean they have to negotiate with these voters. And but the thing I think is like the ship has already sailed on that.
Hmm.
You know, the I think the current data says like 52% of millennials and Gen Z identify as independent. And just increasingly, you can't win an election unless you have independence. So independents delivered the last election to Trump. They delivered the one before for Biden. And I think they are like this really helpful force in our political life, because like you're going to have to make them happy in order to get their vote. Like you're going to have to deliver on the things that matter to them. And, if you're just talking about catering to a base, right? Like those tech guys don't care if you deliver or not. Your base is
Right.
just like, oh yeah, I'm your ride or die. Do
Mhm.
whatever you want. You still get my vote because that's my group, right? Like
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what the values are. It doesn't matter if you accomplish the things I ask for. So this to me, like getting independence involved, voting, just
Right.
engaged is how you get accountability.
So now, I guess a further question to elaborate on that, because independent, independent is a very large tent. Well, and it can be because there's an independent party, which is kind of a
Right.
weird thing, right? Like to say you're an independent party, sort of, it feels very oxymoronish,
Yeah.
but it's a thing, and you can be a registered independent. Um, but then like there's lots of other groups that wouldn't be traditionally considered independents that don't belong to the two party system. So you've got
Hmm.
libertarians for existence, you've got
Hmm.
progressives, you've got socialist communists, you've got a wide variety of people
Right. The Green
who,
Party and Libertarian parties were the
Hmm.
two biggest third party
mhm.
Hmm.
this year.
So
So,
like, oh, sorry. So I guess what I'm getting at is like to say to cater to them, because this is where I feel that, especially for Democrats, Republicans have really buckled down. It feels like on shoring up the base based on a few one issue voter problems, quote unquote, and then suppressing everybody else or deterring everybody else from voting for anything else by making the other party look bad and just making them feel like they're not excited to vote about it, or by making it physically harder to vote. And Democrats spend all of their time focusing on the moderate independents right there in the middle. The disenfranchised Republicans or the conservative Democrats. And that's been fucking useless. Like that's a horrible group to focus on. Uh, and that's just allowed more and more of this polarization, because then all of those other groups get disenfranchised. But if you want to focus on the problems that are important to one of those other groups, I guess what I'm getting at is, what is your proposal, or what have you figured out, or what are you feeling is the right way to move forward to focus on independence and appeal to them, when independence could be, somebody who wants
yeah.
full-blown communism, or independence could be a libertarian, which is, a Republican that wants to smoke weed.
um, yeah, no, that's a really good point. So I think the way we talk about independence at the Independence Center is that they are not necessarily third party voters. They're people who swing vote and split ticket vote because that's where you get the accountability, right? Because that means that like I'm not a partisan.
Hmm.
There's some values that I have that I expect elected officials or a policy to like reflect those values if you're going to get my vote. So, whether like, yeah, you're right. Like you could be a communist and technically you're not a member of either party. Um, we kind of, a lot of people in this space talk about it as being like pro democracy
Hmm.
independence, because like as long as you're still on board with democracy, then I would say like welcome to our club. If your point of
Hmm.
view is like, maybe let's do anarchy, then like that's great, but we might not be the organization for you. Like you do, you fully support. But I think like it's this idea, instead of saying like I'm sure that anybody with the same letter behind their name as me is doing what's in my best interest, you're saying like, okay, I'm going to decide issue by issue. I'm going to, I'm going to vote. I'm splitting my ticket, right? And there's some places where this happens more than other places, and you just have voters who are like, well, this is not a deep blue state. This is not, we're not going to have a blue trifecta in this state. And I think it's healthier for us actually, because as long as we're, and you see this in the party, right, where they're like, oh, now a rhino is anybody that Trump says is not a Republican, right?
Hmm.
Like you have one person deciding who belongs and who doesn't. And to me, that doesn't seem like the basis for a party where you're going to like represent what is important to people and get a bunch of ideas to all come together where everybody is sharing their view of like what's important and what good public policy looks like. It's just
Hmm.
like one person.
Yeah, I mean, that's authoritarianism. I mean, you can't
Well,
have one person dictating everything and be like, yeah, that's democracy and freedom. Like, that's, yeah, absolutely not the way it works. I guess then my follow-up question to that would be, I don't believe split ticket voters exist in 2025. Like, I'm not saying exclusively. There's definitely people who do. I think we have voters that if they're undecided, they don't vote.
mhm,
I think that that's maybe the biggest percentage of those undecided or would be split ticket voters. Or we have people who claim to be a moderate or an independent because they generally don't want to be attached fully onto the like psychosis that is MAGA at this point.
mhm,
But they don't want to admit that they're a Republican in Trump's America
mhm.
republicanism, but they're not ready to out themselves as a left leaning person, or whatever. So it's just coded republicanism, at that point. But I have like I do this, and I will fully admit that I certainly have echo chambers around me. It's really hard not to in social media
Yeah.
sphere. I do live in a rural red area though, and I am friends and family with many people who are not of the same ideology as I am, and I have yet to meet somebody who split ticket votes, or who is truly undecided. I've met unmotivated voters, but almost never an undecided voter.
Yeah, so I'll tell you two examples of split ticket voting that there seems to be have been quite a bit of. I think you're right that these are all different things that you could like pull apart, right? So like being undecided absolutely would make you stay home, right? Or if you just look at the candidates and you're like,
Hmm.
not like I don't know which one is better, but like these are both
Just don't like them.
terrible,
Hmm.
right? Like neither. I am team neither. Um, that totally makes sense that you stay home. And one of the reasons that we're making the Independence Center and like this is, we're not trying to build a political party. We're trying
Hmm.
to build a movement because we think it's really important for people to have an identity that's not just like, I'm neither of those guys, right? Like
Hmm.
you need an identity that says, this is who I am. I'm a person who thinks a lot about policy. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna switch my ticket. I'm gonna swing vote, right? Like I agree with you. It's really hard for me. I don't know the people who like voted Trump, Biden, Trump, Obama. They
Hmm.
exist. There's
Yeah.
like significant numbers of them. I would love to
Well,
talk
so
to these people. Like
is
I
there
want to know.
significant is there significant numbers? Like, do we have a percentage? Because again, like, I know that some of them exist. Some of them
Hmm.
certainly do. I don't know that it's election deciding numbers of people who exist. I think that Trump won the second time, after
Hmm.
Biden, because people stayed home, not because they switched their vote. Like, I mean, voter turnout
Yeah.
dropped. Trump didn't really pick up any new votes. Just
In fact,
Kamala
he
A lot
underperformed
of
Biden.
didn't even win the plurality of
Right.
yeah.
or majority of votes. Like he technically got less than 50%.
Yeah. He
So,
just won the electoral game, which
right.
is
Hmm.
a
Yeah.
feature of our system.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think I'm curious about what you guys think. Like, my read of that decrease in Democrat turnout was that um, people didn't feel heard by the party's platform. And
Hmm.
that, like, if people tell you they feel poor and you're like, no, you're not, you don't feel poor. Like, to
Hmm.
me, like, that is gaslighting, right? Or if
Definitely.
you're like, hey, the president doesn't look like he's doing really hot, and you're like, he is the best ever, right?
Hmm.
Like, I'm not saying like they were dishonest.
Hmm.
I'm saying when you tell people that their experience is invalid, I don't think
No,
that they don't feel energized to show up to the poll.
no, you're 1,000% correct. I mean, we have spent countless hours of our lives, both publicly and privately, bitching about Democrat marketing or messaging, specifically on those types of issues. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The frustrating thing is Democrats do that as a party, and people who would normally vote Democrat or turn out, if they do turn out, that's the way that they would vote, feel like it's gaslighting, feel like it's disingenuous. But Trump just like literally today or yesterday posted on True Social that eggs are down 87% and everywhere, and gas is as cheap as it's ever been. And it's like, you can physically see with your own eyes that none of that is true. Not a single syllable of that message was true. We can see that. And you are telling us that that's the same thing. You're not poor. The
Yeah.
economy is doing great. And under the Biden administration, at least that was based in some reality. Like, the economy was objectively better in every way than when he took office, right?
In the bad ways that we measure the economy, which is
right.
Like if you were smart and you were a populist in any way whatsoever, you would say, oh, those measures are archaic and don't accurately reflect the American existence as it is today. But you could choose to ignore that. That's kind of the reality, and just say, the stock market's doing better. The job,
inflation's come down.
Inflation's coming down. Employment's low. Like, the signs that you would say these are the signs that they point to, like the economy isn't the worst it's ever been. It is. Right. I personally feel like the Democrats lost. Because just Kamala wasn't a super strong candidate, and they didn't package her, or she didn't want to package her message in a way that addressed the sentiment that you described, that America really isn't great for cost of living, for housing, education costs, medical costs, like all these things that we can see are actually affecting Americans. All she had was, we have an opportunity economy. Or I want to bring an opportunity economy. Like, nobody knew what that was. I still have no idea.
Yeah.
There's like a tax credit for small businesses. I guess that was her big thing. But it's like really like a small issue. So to me, the Democrats lost the plot. They didn't have any time to introduce Kamala as a candidate. Less than 100 days basically to get a platform for her. And running to, and I hear what you're saying about there, like more independents voted, than Democrats. I watched a couple of your videos, and I don't understand how that correlates to like the Democrats running for conservative independents. Like, they just sprinted to every issue towards that independent or like just moderate Democrat sort of position, and they still lost 8 million voters from the 2020 election. Like, I can't do that math.
We're trying to read tea leaves, right? Like, when we're trying to figure out, like, somebody, you went to a polling place and you picked one of two names, basically, right? And like trying to figure out what was going on in your head when you did that, I think is like kind of impossible. One thing I was going to say about the economic perceptions is, like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this graph, but it's common to chart people's like consumer confidence according to political party. And if you look at that graph, what you'll see is the day your party's president takes office, your consumer confidence like shoots off, right? It skyrockets.
It's insane.
And the other party's plummets, right? Which is crazy, right? Because like, why day one, nothing is changing. So why do you feel economically better? And that's like an in-group, out-group story, 100%. And the reason is because what in-groups do is preferentially give resources to their own members. So when your group is in charge, you're like, cool, waiting to get the stuff, like, this is great. And what you do to out-group members is deny them resources. Like, you don't give them resources. You don't give them fair treatment. You don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think the problem to me...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, let me... Just one other thing. Like, the problem to me is that it's like this in-group, out-group thinking has crept in without us noticing it. And I think it explains a lot, and it concerns me that it explains so much, because I don't think we should be outgrouping fellow Americans. Like, I don't see how we can operate a democracy if we're like, you have an R after your name, and so you're the bad guy. Like, you're opposed to me. Sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, so I was going to bring up the fact that like you said that you in group your voter base is what you were getting at, I'm assuming. Like so if
So like the in group is like so group membership is like super flexible, right? Like you could
mhm,
activate a group that you feel part of really easily, but like your in group would just be like Republicans or Democrats, whatever your party is. And the
yeah.
out group is the other side.
So cuz like I guess where I get confused and frustrated, especially with the right, because yeah, we get frustrated on the left when the left doesn't deliver on its promises for you know what we were hoping for. But like on the right, you see Trump, just Republicans in general for decades have put in policies that effectively disenfranchised and removed resources from the groups that rely on them the most. I mean, the Republican Party tends to be more impoverished, tends to rely more on social welfare programs that Republicans run on the basis of cutting. We see how the tariffs and the cuts to ag and USAID and stuff like that have disproportionately affected rural communities like my own, farming communities that overwhelmingly supported Trump and Republicans and have since since Nixon pretty much. Um, so like I guess I struggle to see the in-group thing. If that's the case, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you were saying there about like allocating resources in in-group, and that's why your consumer confidence would go up. Because I saw no reason why farmers' consumer confidence should go up when Trump was reelected.
Yeah, no, this is how they behave. This is how we expect them to behave. This is sort of like the reality we project around ourselves. Like we tend to just feel like if my group's in charge, I'm going to get more stuff. I'm going to be better off. I don't think that it's borne out in reality.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I think, like life is so complex at this point that it's like, it's very hard to see the impact of a set of policies on your pocketbook. I mean, now
Hmm.
we're in a little bit of an exception, right? Because when we're talking about like massive tariffs, then like, yeah, you're absolutely going to see that. But this is new territory. I think that I can't remember the source for this, but a few people have found this recently, which is that like actually the districts that voted for Trump in I believe the previous election, not this one, not 2024, they actually tend to get more government aid through various, through entitlement, social safety net type programs, but also ag subsidies. So, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
the idea that this is like the fiscally responsible Republican Party of 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, like it's clearly not. Something is clearly shifting.
Yeah. I
Well,
guess I think of it in as for Jordan, like when people unironically say, "Oh, you're in Trump's America now," like America has changed all of a sudden because like immediately Trump
Hmm.
became president. Like obviously he's done a lot since
I mean, to be
January
fair,
20th.
that flurry
As
that flurry of executive orders was like a lot did change on day one. Both policy wise and just cultural shift at that point, and that yeah. So if we have been in Trump's America since day one, I feel like honestly, I feel like we've been in Trump's America since he came down that fucking golden escalator. Like
true story.
it's been a bit of a nightmare.
I mean, screw
You
you,
know,
Yeah.
Simpsons, for projecting that.
this is right. They manifested that. They like brought that into reality. Thanks,
Exactly.
guys.
Exactly.
Um, I one of the things that I think is really important to notice about the in group out group thing though, and this relates to that point of like you're in Trump's America, is that within our own groups, when we see people who are distressed and concerned and hurt and worried, like we automatically empathize with them. We look at them and go like, "Oh gosh, like what's happening? Can I help? Are you okay?" And when we see that same reaction in out group members, we are unsympathetic and in some cases like delighted. It's schadenfreude, right? Like it's that just like really icky sort of delight at other people's suffering. And that's what I think about when I hear like you're in Trump's America now. is like,
Mm-hmm.
I see you're unhappy and I'm celebrating the fact that you are unhappy. And the reason you're
Yep.
unhappy is because, again, like this is drawing from this very old programming we have running in our brains for outgroup membership. The reason you're unhappy is because you know that like it's not your group handing out justice, handing out resources. It
Mm-hmm.
feels threatening, and you have people gloating about it. And like this is not good. That's my professional opinion.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
I mean, I generally tend to agree, and I think as progressives, our goal is always to uplift everybody's economic and civil right, like a bit, equity within this country, and whether you're Republican or Democrat, when you work in a union, you get paid more, and so we prefer people get unions, so people get
Mm-hmm.
paid more to do their work. Um, it is, in my opinion, not helpful to say like, oh, sort of the opposite of that, being on the left or Democrats saying, oh, this is Trump's America. You're welcome for the increased prices and tariffs. Like, I think it's important to point out, like, these are not going to be good for average Americans, generally speaking. And historically, in his first presidency, did not have any beneficial outcomes really at all. But like being happy that like Republican people who voted for Trump are like doing bad is pretty counterproductive to ever getting those people to open their minds to thinking a different way and perhaps looking beyond their echo chamber.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely am looking past the Trump administration to kind of like what does it take to get like I don't believe that this is the new type of politics that we're going to do
Hmm.
going forward. I really don't. For a lot of different reasons. But one of the questions I have is like, what does it take for people to kind of come back together? Where, like you're saying, it's counterproductive to be like, yeah, what I really want to see is Trump voters being harmed, right? Like Trump voters feeling the same way I feel, right? Like that's not counterproductive. I don't think that like we're sort of destined or fated to be in that place. And so one of my questions is like, how do we get things to be more normal? And I think independence can help make things more normal. I think people want to see a more moderate view, um, a more moderate approach to politics. And I worry that like we're just kind of getting more entrenched in our difference, and that we're going to continue this outgroup thing. But my question is like, what are the things we need to do to like close the door on this chapter of American politics? What
I
would it
think
look like? Maybe it's not possible.
yeah,
Maybe I'm crazy. You can
I
tell
Well,
think
me.
no,
you're
But like, what
that's
would it look
optimistic.
like?
I think your feeling is a lot more optimistic than I think we would put it. Even before the
yeah.
election, I think we would have said that our political climate is tense, and it really doesn't seem like it's going away from our perspective. But Jordan, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I was like, this is what we have you on here for. I mean, we
Yeah.
Damn
we have
it.
our
I
very
have
own
to answer
opinions.
this.
We think that really the failure here has been chasing uh centrists. I won't say
Okay.
independents specifically, but centrists, um because that has, if you're always chasing if one party's always chasing the center and the other party's always pushing to the right, you are going to continue to move right, and you go far enough right, you're fascist. Like that's the ultimate goal of conservatism is authoritarianism. Like that's the end result. Um and that's the thing is like for example, this election, and this is the one issue I always go back to, was immigration. Like, Republicans have been pushing anti-immigration rhetoric for it really came about under the baby Bush administration. Like, that's when immigration crackdowns kind of started becoming a big thing. Um, and we go back to, Reagan, and Reagan, they talk, all these conservatives talk about open borders, open
Hmm.
border Democrats and all that, but the last president to give amnesty to undocumented immigrants was Reagan. Obama, up until recently, had deported more immigrants than any other president. Um, and now you had the Biden administration and Kamala chase that immigration rhetoric to the right. He signed an executive order to crack down on the border, and they basically gave the Republicans a bipartisan immigration package that was their wish list that they still shot down because they couldn't give a Democrat a win. But it was, in my opinion, it was a horrible policy. I mean, I think it was dumb that the Republicans shot it down for something so petty, but it was not good immigration policy. And all the point was, all of that was miles to the right of Reagan on immigration policy, and Reagan was a super conservative president, right? Like this was a seriously conservative president. And so I think that chasing something when you've got nothing counter-worthy to offer, like if you already don't want immigrants coming into the country, you know who you're voting for. Like you had that. They weren't going to win any of those votes. And I think that, in my opinion, the thing that they really missed the boat on, and they always miss the boat on these issues, is Republicans will message something. They'll do a really good job at drumming up an issue around it, whether it exists or not. And then Democrats will be like, oh shit, we need to try to be better than them on this issue the way that they're doing it. Rather than just do the opposite of whatever that issue is, and that's where you run out of places to have choice there. We saw the same thing with Gaza and Israel, where it's like, well, both countries are going to keep sort of keeping the status quo of that situation. And there was no counter messaging there. There was no counter option there. It's like if one of those two issues was important to you, immigration or Gaza, you had no choices. Like that was your one issue vote. Whereas, we've been saying like the progressives that feel alienated, and those are the ones that I feel like are not showing up. People, the further left you go, that's where that should be chasing. But I don't know if you would really consider them independents, and if that would be the route that like your organization is like would be recommending. Because I'm assuming that's kind of what you're trying to do is build an idea of how the parties can attract those non-voters or independent voters to get involved and register and vote, if I'm understanding what you're doing correctly. So that was my big long rant. I will let you go ahead and tell me what you think on it now.
There's like 18 things I need to say. No. So like we're not trying, you said like that we would want to get them involved with the parties, and like I don't want them to go home to a party. I mean,
Okay.
it's not my call, right?
Can I
But
clarify
like,
that?
yeah.
I didn't mean get them involved with the party. You were saying like how the parties need to message to independent voters to get them to come out and vote, or that was like something we talked about a little earlier, and like how because you obviously if they don't get out and vote, you lose elections, right? And so like they should be motivated to be engaging these independents who can swing both ways, or these non-voters to the polls to vote for them, whoever them would be. So that's what I meant by like not necessarily getting them what the party needs to do to attract those independent voters, either party.
So I look at it sort of like those voters are going to pull the parties back towards the center, because basically they want to see compromise, they want to see effective policy on whatever their issue is. And there's actually like this really well documented phenomenon in social networks, not social media networks, but just like networks of people, where as you get these like smaller, cohesive, homogenous groups of people, they take a viewpoint and they get more and more extreme on it. And I think that's what you are seeing with the parties, where they're like drifting away from each other because they're getting smaller and smaller, because like normal people are sort of like, I don't want to participate in this. They're like, I don't want to like tell people something about policy and they're going to yell at me. And I don't want to yell at people. I don't want to call people like racists or whatever, right? Like, I just don't want to have this nasty conversation. And so the problem with that, with reasonable people dropping out, is like we're left with these really dumb policy conversations. Like, to me, the conversation should not be open the borders or close the borders. And like, I agree that I agree. That's what we're like hearing from the two parties, right? It's like, let them all in, let nobody in. Like, that's dumb.
That's not what we're hearing from the two parties. We're hearing that from one party saying that about both parties.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I think the thing that I would say we desperately need is immigration reform, right?
Mhm.
Because there's some optimal amount of immigration that like brings new people and ideas and resources into the country and recognizes the humanity of people who are fleeing really desperate situations. And like we can balance competing needs. We're smart. We have computers, we have thumbs, like there's all kinds of stuff that we could figure out, but it's like it's complicated to figure out, and in this really dumb argument that we're having, we're not fixing this incredibly broken system.
Right. No, I'd agree 100% with that.
So, I guess one of the big questions I had was, are you guys? So, you guys are basically just trying to promote this independent movement in order to sway institutional power as it currently exists in a way that is populist.
Oh, I think our point of view is the polarization we have right now is letting us avoid some like really serious issues. The primary one is like the debt and the deficit. So there's nobody in Washington who is doing anything about spending. And Doge is not, unfortunately, doing anything about spending. We have this social security system that's going to go bankrupt. Like, how do we fix it? And everybody's like, oh, not us, not us. And like, I don't know how you guys look at it, but I look at the money of mine that went into Social Security and I just assume I will never see any of it. Is that like what you guys assume? Or are you
I mean, at
Well,
this rate,
as
absolutely.
optimistic?
far as Social Security, that theoretically it will never run out completely because it's always based off of it money coming
Current
in and
working
money
for.
going out as
Mhm.
benefits. The current trust that's in question is the extra like 27 to 28% of benefits that's been used to like fund the government in a like they Congress has been taking loans out against it, and that's why it's sort of like, and it just the funding was set up like 65 years ago and hasn't
Right.
been, we haven't re-legislated how it's supposed to be funded since then, and so now there's ways that we could re-legislate that to ensure that the additional benefits that people should be receiving are actually taxed correctly. um, so I guess we would probably disagree on what it means to like this the debt and the deficit thing. I think where every American would agree that like fraud or waste is like bad, and that Doge is doing this like show of like
Hmm.
supposedly cutting things, but in reality, every time you fact check something that they said or done, it's either just completely false. It's funding that's already been spent, and they're
Mhm.
saying they've cut a $500 billion grant that's they've already spent 10 years of it, so it's only $80 million now or something like
Right.
that, or $800 million now. So it's like, uh, and then there's already governmental bodies like the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, and there's the IRS that will go after corporations for not paying their taxes. So like there's already ways that we combat fraud and abuse. Certainly there's more that we could do to
I mean,
fight corruption, but I think when your website says we need a smaller, focused, and fit for purpose and less overburdened and overreaching bureaucracy, I feel like those are antithetical.
yeah. And I mean, like, sorry, but spending, and this is something that always trips me up, is people say we need to focus on spending when spending
Sorry.
isn't the issue. Revenue's the issue, right? Like we're not bringing in enough to cover our bills, and we're not bringing in enough to cover our bills because we have cut taxes for the people who can pay those bills. The people who receive an outsized portion of our economic production, and get to hang on to that and aren't forced to reinvest that money back into the economy, where we would be bringing in that revenue. Then, this isn't new or wild policy there, and it's not even policy that we haven't done before effectively.
Yeah, I think that Doge is theatrics, right? Like it's not,
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about significant cuts. Um, and we're not talking about, things that could be modernized, right? Or things that could be improved. We're talking about cuts that are politically motivated because we're assuming that, again, this is very much an outgroup process, right? Like this, I assume this is an agency being run by Democrats, and therefore I'm cutting it. And that's not a reasonable way, right, to make cuts. I also think it's introducing a lot of economic uncertainty, and that uncertainty brings, right, like all the decisions that lead to economic growth, it just brings them to a halt, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's everyday decisions people are making, right? Like, do you start a business now? Do you have another kid? Do you buy a bigger house? Right? Like that type of uncertainty is just the opposite of economic growth.
Yeah.
I think that when we're talking about like efficient government and government that's fit for purpose, I think like we need to take a look at a lot of these things, but that doesn't mean that we think that you give one person carte blanche to go around cutting whatever they disagree with. Um, so I think there's a lot of ways to improve the efficiency of government to combat waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, I the idea that like big parts of our spending are driven by waste, fraud, and abuse just seems ludicrous to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is not there. That's always been a big focus of cutting spending. And like, you're not going to get to any real solutions. Like there we're in agreement. You're not going to get to real
Mm-hmm.
solutions by being like, oh, let's cut fraud. That's this tiny percentage of actual spending. I think it requires a lot of re-envisioning of where wealth creation actually comes from. Because I think, like one of the big differences in Social Security from when it was originally created to now is the number of workers supporting a retiree. And like the demographic trends that we're looking at, especially with more like
Automation. Yeah.
thank you.
Automation.
Automation.
Automation. Automation.
Automation. Thank you.
We got there. We
It's
got there.
We got there.
we're at the word salad portion of this interview. But yeah, more automation, more AI, all of this stuff. It's like if we're gonna have to think about our economy really differently. We absolutely don't need to go and like rebuild our economy into a manufacturing economy. Right. So like I think that we really need a different vision for the economics of how we're gonna invest in the country and spend our money wisely. And I think there's just like no, you know, I'm not a Social Security expert by any stretch of the imagination, but the kind of like current optics where people in your generation, even more than mine, right? Like, so I'm the elder millennial here. Like people who are trying to form their families are like having these huge Social Security taxes taken out of their paychecks every month, and they're going to support baby boomers who like refuse to have a conversation about what we're doing with Social Security. To me, that's just like we
Ludicrous.
need to have a
Absolutely ludicrous.
conversation. Yeah, I'm not saying like let's cut them off. I understand that people supported those things, and right, like their paychecks went to Social Security when they were our ages, and like there's some equity that we absolutely need to have as part of this conversation. But I think we also need to like look at real drivers of spending and debt.
Yeah. I mean, I guess a lot of these things, and this is we're getting a little in the weeds here on it, but I feel like a lot of these things we talk about, like there's so much nuance, and
Mm-hmm.
in something like this, there's not. Like, I mean, you raise taxes on the people who are not paying enough taxes, and you take the cap off of Social Security, so the people who have blown way past the income cap on Social Security are paying into Social Security, and then that pretty much solves the problem, and
Yeah,
it's not like when we
what's the number you need to raise the cap? Isn't it like four?
I,
Is it? I don't even know if it's 400,000. I think you just raise the cap for. I think it's like 150,000 now or something. If you
Mhm.
raise it to like 250,000 or something like that, you increase the trust by like 10 years or something. Like it's
Yeah. And what I don't understand either is why things like this get to be so controversial. Like why do we have people who, live in a single wide worried about us raising the social security cap on billionaires or
Yeah.
making them pay 40% instead of 27% or whatever the fuck they're at now? When, I mean, again, back in the 50s and 60s, their top marginal tax rate was 90 something percent. And that doesn't mean that they're paying 90% in those taxes. It just means that they are spending that money so they can write it off. And when they spend that money, that creates jobs. They give people raises. The companies that they work for, they give them raises and better benefits and things that they can write off because that creates equity in the company. And that's better than just giving it to the government. But then all of those people, there's more jobs, which means more people are paying taxes. There's better paying jobs, which means they're paying more taxes, and that fixes our revenue problem. And then, we can squibble and squabble about spending, but like if we're paying the bills, the spending part isn't really an issue.
I mean, I don't I wouldn't say it's a simple question, right? Like, what is the right tax rate? Because I think really like the way we should think about it is there's some set of taxes and policies that drives economic growth for the country, right? So that everybody is better off. What those are, I don't know because I'm not that smart, right? And like it's incredibly complicated, and like we need smart people looking at it. We need everybody, we need everything to be on the
But
table, right? Because yes, some
but
of that would be higher taxes on certain groups. There are other taxes that like it's like any tax you give or you implement, it's going to have an effect on people's behavior. And so the question is, are what is the best we can do to understand what those taxes are and the effect it's going to have on like the net growth of the country?
I'm in favor of a
again,
tax program that makes no more billionaires. That's my tax
yeah,
program
yeah.
platform.
And once again, it's like I understand that some things have changed in the past 50, 60 years, and we need to consider uh, modernizing tax plans that have worked in the past and we know work to make the entire country and the entire economy more equitable for everyone. Um, but the underlying principle is there, and we've seen it in action, and we've seen it work. And not only that, we see the underlying principle of those working in other countries right now today in a modern global economy. And it's difficult for me to. I think we get into dangerous territory when we give credence to the idea that some of these issues are that complicated. Like there's simple issues like social safety nets are always a net economic positive, right? Like making sure that people have a roof over their head, food in their belly, the ability to go get health care that doesn't bankrupt them. Um, those things always 100% of the time produce higher economic returns than the inputs we put into them. Education investment always produces higher economic returns than the inputs we put into them. Things like the UPS and the highway systems, public infrastructure, all or USPS and public infrastructure always return more than we put in. These are investments in our society and our system, and we see
Yeah.
this effectively across the board. So I feel like when we try to muddy that up with this is a nuanced topic or something that's really complicated, and that invites those places to sow doubt, and this is what has stopped us from having those conversations, I think, because people don't feel that they're educated enough to understand something that is relatively simple, as long as we don't get super deep in the weeds on the policy parts that shouldn't concern the layman.
I mean, that's an interesting point that like it drives people out of conversation when they feel like it's so complex. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, and I just want to go back to like one of the things you said is that the social safety nets are economic drivers. Like what I would say is I agree. I think that the evidence supports that, but it's also the morally right thing to do.
Absolutely, of
And
course.
like I think that we need to have a serious conversation, and I I don't know why this has eluded us. Like we need to have a serious conversation about sources of spending that are moral decisions and they're not dry, right? Like that, those are two different categories.
And you could
Um,
argue that's what U.S. aid was, in a sense.
Mhm.
One
well, you know,
percent to
you
Yeah.
our
could also
GDP.
argue it's a military effort, right?
Yeah, it
Like,
was
Well,
absolutely.
yeah,
But
yeah,
but it's
but
like two things can be true, right? We could feel
yeah.
morally good about U.S. aid. It's also saving us money and buying us goodwill around the world, which was very beneficial to us. So it's like those two things can be true, and we're never,
yeah.
rarely as a country, we're ever going to do something that's just intrinsically good, without there being some underlying benefit to us, because that's generally human nature, especially when you have rich and wealthy people in power. Um,
You know, I don't know. I want to give us a little more credit for that. I think like we went into World War II because we were trying to make the, you know, trying to make a difference in the world. I think that we can be a country that is like that is saying like, hey, we're not perfect, but we're trying to do what we believe is right on some of these causes. Foreign aid absolutely should be one of them. And, you know, especially when this is not an appreciable source of spending, right?
mhm.
And I mean, this is an old statistic. It gets batted around all the time, but people talk about the fact that like if you ask people what is the right amount of foreign aid spending to do, if they give a number, it is always far lower, or sorry, far high. How does that go? It's the number of what they think we should do is like way higher than what we actually do, right? So
Oh,
like
Mhm.
they
yeah.
constantly overestimate the amount that we spend on foreign aid.
Mhm.
And I mean, part of that goes to the fact that our budget numbers are so staggering that like normal people can't deal with them.
Yeah.
True, but
No, and
also most people don't understand how currency works, and that we control the global supply of money, and that if we had a balanced budget, then the economy physically couldn't grow because the government creates its own currency. So, like,
mhm.
balancing budget is like an interesting term. I think that like
Yeah.
Republicans have like made this like that's the right thing to be, when it's like, well, if
Right.
you understand that how the fiat currencies work, then we literally can't have a balanced budget because we control
Mhm.
the supply of money.
Well, and also we can't. They have pitched national debt like it's the same thing as your mortgage or your credit card debt. And that's not how a national debt works. Like a country cannot go bankrupt. Like we as a country cannot go bankrupt. Our money can be devalued and the debt can
Right.
have very negative effects, but it's not like they're gonna pull up
Turn
like a
off the
repo
power.
truck and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like um understanding like a fiat currency, the United States government could pay off all its bills tomorrow. Like it could print all of the money and pay off all the bills, and we would no longer be in debt. The money would be worthless at that
Right,
point,
exactly.
but
So
like
then I don't know if that's in practice like a solution, if
no,
it
no,
would
it's not in practice as a solution.
torpedo.
It's just like national debt, like our national debt, and talking about it as debt is disingenuous, not on purpose. Well, it's very on purpose disingenuous from the way that like Republicans often talking about the debt crisis, but it's not a crisis as long as we manage that national debt to not drive rampant inflation. It can increase forever, and it's just a number. That's all it is. The only thing we need to worry about with the debt is managing inflation.
Especially
And
if you
that
subscribe to modern monetary theory,
right.
in like with the way that we're utilizing our currency right now, it very much so relies upon modern monetary theory and the understanding of
Mm-hmm.
fiat currency. So,
Well, I think
um,
talking about it in this like really like, you know, like bimodal kind of way where it's like there's a right and a wrong, right? Like debt bad, debt good, right? Like that's what is not helpful, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
if our debt continues to snowball, it leads us in the path of some financial outcomes that are less positive. And if we wipe out all the debt tomorrow, that also like leads
Mm-hmm.
us in directions that are not positive. What we need here is a balancing act. And I am absolutely not a fiscal expert, not a monetary
Mm-hmm.
systems expert. Um, but I can tell you that the political conversation that we're having right now is like oversimplifying something that I think people would like to see a more serious conversation about. And what the way I look at it is, as long as the two parties sort of like limit the game to themselves in terms
Mm-hmm.
of presenting solutions, then nobody's being forced to have a serious conversation about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
So, kind of final things before we're running out of time. I personally have 2 minutes. Jordan, you can continue
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you
No. No. No.
if
We
you
can.
don't.
We can wrap this
Um,
up.
just wanted to point out that I didn't see any major political or democratic reformations on your page, like ranked choice voting, public funded
Mm-hmm.
campaigns, ending Citizens United as a constitutionally protecting corporations. I'm assuming those things are absolutely you would be in favor of at least most of those.
So we have been a big supporter of the ideas of like open primaries because we see that as like one of the big
Sure.
opportunities for where, right, and like this is, they work on open primary issues, but also some of the ranked choice voting things. We think that would be really advantageous for independent voters being
Yeah,
heard.
absolutely.
We aren't styling ourselves as like a think tank or a policy group. So we might be a little bit different than some of the other organizations you're thinking of.
Mhm.
But we don't see our role as like, let's go tell independents what the answers are. So we're looking at it more like, if you tell us what your values are, we can tell you how policies get you closer to that or not. But I look at what we're trying to do as inviting more people. Sorry, this is a cat. I just feel like
Yeah.
people are
You're
going
all
to
good.
see this on the internet and be like, what is happening?
I think they appreciate
Um,
it.
this woman has a tail. No, it's not me, it's the cat. But that like we want to invite more people into politics, and I don't think that we're going to do that by like talking about monetary policy
Right.
necessarily. So we would like to build out the sections of our websites that like help explain how values relate to different policies, but we don't see our job as being like, here are the answers, here are the things that you need to support. And this is like a bottom up thing, right? Like we're not a party that tells people, here's the platform, here are the values. We are trying to get together a group of voters and understand what their values are and what is important to them. And so it is different than a party. And I know you guys are like very invested in the Democratic Party getting back on track. And so like we look at it a little bit differently, right? Because like we want voters to feel represented and heard.
Right.
And like if that happens through the Democratic Party, then that's fine. But I'm not like my loyalty isn't to a party.
Yeah, no, I think you misunderstand. We are not loyal to the Democratic Party or getting that back on track by
Okay.
any means. I would love to have third party representation. Unfortunately, we live or I would love to see at least a more representative party system in place. At this point, that's not the reality we live in, right? And so real effective change today happens by trying to push the parties that currently exist to represent us in the direction we would like to see them go. And in doing that, can hopefully do things like ranked choice voting, like open primaries, things that would make those opportunities more advantageous, open those up for independent voters or third party voters. So no, I think that we are very anti-conservatism as what that represents today. So obviously, there's no place for us in that party to try to bring the country back. So we fall
Right.
to the left of the Democratic Party at this point, and we're like begging them to just come a little bit our way and not let us deteriorate into fascism. I guess what I want to know then is you're not looking to form a political party, you're not looking to form a think tank, you're not looking to build policy, or pitch policy. You're looking to just connect voters with ideas of policy, but that means you've got to at least endorse policy in some form or fashion. And what is that going to look like? Because
Hmm.
again, those things that we just getting money out of politics, getting rid of Citizens United, open primaries, ranked choice voting, um, those are all that's the policies, right? Like that would be
Hmm.
so
Yeah. So
what is it
we,
going to look like? Where are you getting? What's the end goal? What are you getting at? What should people be looking to your organization for?
so the main thing that we're trying to do right now is like create an identity, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you don't care for either party or you like pieces of both parties, like this is a place for you. We're trying to understand what people are like who are political independents. We're trying
Mm-hmm.
to offer resources that make it easier to vote if you're a political independent, because
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we know is that it's different to register in every single state
Mm-hmm.
as an independent. And in some of those states, it's tricky and confusing. And so we think that's like disenfranchising independents.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to have an impact on some of these like longer term structural things like ranked choice voting is, this is years in the making. I think
Mm-hmm.
those changes will come about over time, but like the thing that we're able to do in this moment is just get more people to participate politically. And I think making it so that parties can't count on partisans to support them is like the single biggest thing that we can do to make democracy more participative, right? Like
Yeah.
it's real. Like if you're talking about like get rid of Citizens United, like I don't know, we could support it, but like I don't know
Right.
how that support translates into an active change because there's such
Okay.
entrenched,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like
Uh-huh.
we're trying to work with what we can do in this moment with a
Mm-hmm.
small amount of resources.
Okay. So yeah, I guess then I'm just trying to get the final picture of the vision of how this ideal that you see for your organization translates to actionable results or tangible results. Like what do you, if everything goes the way that you hope, how does that process look? What will people how will people be able to interact, or how will your organization
Hmm.
be interacting with the political sphere to accomplish that goal?
So we'd like to start getting people together in person. That's like our kind of next step is have people actually get to know each other and have this
Mhm.
be an actual thing that's a little not, it's still not a party, but at least feels like something that you could belong to,
Mhm.
feel like there are people like you. And then we'd like to, there are existing efforts to support independent candidates across the country. So we would like to, as far as we can, in a 501c3 nonprofit capacity, like we would like to
Mhm.
be supportive of independent candidates.
Okay. Well, I
So
like that.
that's our play here for the next year or so.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I appreciate the work you're doing. I think one thing I preach a lot that I've been really frustrated with is it's really hard to organize in anything. Organization is difficult. Like I suck at organizing groups and things like that. And I appreciate the fact that that's what you're working on to get more political engagement and investment in just civic duty. Um, so I think you're doing good work. I think that we are very much on a similar mind frame, a similar train of thought on what needs to happen in this country, and I do think that we need a ton of different ideas and approaches to get those people engaged and make that change. So I think you're doing really great work. I'm gonna let you, anything you want to shamelessly plug on how people can find you, how people can find your organization, what the projects you're working on that you want them to support. Please just let them do it, or
All right.
plug away.
I appreciate that. We would love it if any of this sounds interesting to you. Our website is www.independencecenter.org. It's a little hard to find, but there's a place that says get involved, and you can send us a message through that space where you can tell us, like, what are you an independent? Like, if you feel like you're an independent, like, what is it that is appealing to you? What are you looking for in policies and candidates? What are you looking for in the independent movement? Like, just reach out, because we follow up on those messages, and we're interested in what people have to share about that. We are a bottom up grassroots movement, and we're interested in what individuals are looking for. So, we would love for people to contact us there. We're on social media, so if you go to our website, you can also get to social media if you'd like to connect with us in those places. And we do an occasional newsletter, so if you need one more thing to read, you can hit the subscribe button on our website, and we will only bother you every other week. It's not a huge commitment, but yeah, we'd love to hear from people who are independents, and who think that there's a path here.
Okay, that's awesome. And then I just noticed somebody in the comments, and it's independent that I've actually supported. I've done some promotional stuff for his campaign and stuff. But Dan Osborne, he's running for Senate
Yeah.
again.
Yep.
Are you guys going to be supporting him coming into this election? Then I'm assuming.
We need to figure out a process. We can't endorse candidates because we're C3. So we have to be really careful about what we say about candidates. But yes, we're aware that independents like Dan are running for office, and we think it's great to have candidates who are not partisans. And Dan's
and what about
very
Bernie? Because
interesting
Bernie's technically an independent
He's
too.
Technically, but I still can't make an endorsement, so we have to
I know,
be
I know.
really careful. This is a
Putting you
new
on the
area for
spot.
me. I know. I need more coaching on what I'm allowed to say. But yeah, we have to be really careful about the things that we endorse. So,
All right. Well, again,
absolutely.
thank you so much. Sorry, Taylor had to run and jump off on a
Yeah,
work call.
we lost Taylor.
Yeah, but I appreciate the hell out of you guys reaching out, and you giving us a little bit of your time. This was a great conversation, and we'd love to have you back on at some point once you get a little more along the way. I don't want to say organized. I guess I don't know how far you are, but a little more
Yeah,
concretely
we'll
set
check
up.
in.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Well, thank
yeah.
you for the conversation. I really appreciate you guys having me on, and that you guys are out there, like, fighting the good fight, talking about this stuff.
Oh, well, we appreciate it. Obviously, we need people to talk about fighting the good fight with, and bring new ideas to it. So, again, thank you so much. Everybody, go check out Independent.
Independent
Sorry,
Center.
Independent Center.
IndependenceCenter.org.
IndependenceCenter.org. Go check it out. And we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.